The king stood up and bowed to the richest woman in the room. That was the law. But when he looked at her face, his heart stopped. Because 10 years ago, he signed the paper that sold her. And 3 days later, he was told she was dead. But she wasn't dead. She was standing right in front of him, stronger than his throne, richer than his kingdom. And she had waited for 9 years, 4 months, and 11 days for this exact moment.
Long ago, in a strong and beautiful kingdom, there lived a young king named Oba Damilola. He had just become king after his father died. He was kind, he was fair, but he was still learning, because ruling a kingdom is not easy. Beside him stood his uncle, Baba Rotimi. Baba Rotimi was old and very powerful. He had helped raise the king. He spoke loudly in the council. He controlled many things, trade, soldiers, and secrets. Many people feared him. Many people obeyed him. And sometimes, even the king listened to him too much. The king had a younger sister. Her name was Kemi. Kemi was 20 years old. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was smart, very smart. She asked questions. She spoke in meetings. She gave ideas that made people listen. And the people of the kingdom loved her. They smiled when she passed. They listened when she spoke. Some even said, if Kemi was king, she would rule well. And that was the problem. One evening, Baba Rotimi sat quietly in his room. His face was hard. His eyes were cold. He spoke to a man in a low voice. A tree that grows too fast, he said slowly, can break the house. The man nodded. Baba Rotimi continued, the girl must go. The man hesitated. She is the king's sister. Baba Rotimi's eyes sharpened. And I am the reason that king still sits on the throne. The room became silent. Then Baba Rotimi gave the order, quietly, carefully, no noise, no mistakes. Princess Kemi must disappear. 3 nights later, Kemi was taken. She did not even understand what was happening. Men came in the dark. They covered her mouth. They tied her hands. She struggled. She cried, "Let me go. Do you know who I am?" But no one answered her, because to them, she was no longer a princess. She was just a product. Far away, Baba Rotimi stood before the young king. His face was full of fake sadness. "My king," he said softly, "there is bad news." The king's heart dropped. "What is it?" Baba Rotimi lowered his head. "Your sister, Princess Kemi, she fell sick after the burial." The king froze. "What do you mean, sick?" "It was a strong fever," Baba Rotimi said. "We tried everything." The king stepped back. No, where is she now?" Baba Rotimi looked away. "She is gone." The king did not speak. He could not speak. Tears filled his eyes. "My sister," he whispered. Baba Rotimi nodded slowly. "We buried her this morning." The king fell to his knees. "No, I didn't even see her. I didn't say goodbye." He cried like a child, because that was his only sister, his friend, his family. And now she was gone, or so he believed. A small grave was made. A quiet burial was done. People cried. Drums were beaten softly. The kingdom mourned. And the story was simple. Princess Kemi died of fever. No one questioned it. No one looked deeper, because Baba Rotimi controlled the story. But the truth was far away, across rivers, across land, across pain. Kemi was alive. She was taken to the coast, put on a boat, sold like goods, moved again to a strange land, a place where no one knew her name, no one cared who she was. There, she became something else. Not a princess, not a royal, not even Kemi. She became a servant girl. She washed floors, she carried water, she scrubbed pots until her hands hot. People shouted at her, ordered her around, ignored her tears. At night, she lay on a thin mat, looking at the ceiling, alone, confused, broken. One night, she whispered to herself, "I did nothing wrong." Her voice shook. "I was just loved." A tear rolled down her cheek, then another, then many more. And in that quiet, painful moment, a truth was born. Sometimes, in the wrong place, being loved is the most dangerous thing you can be. Kemi closed her eyes, tears falling silently. Her old life was gone. Her name was gone. Her home was gone. Everything she knew was gone. But something inside her did not die. Not her mind, not her strength, not her fire. Because the girl they stole was not ordinary, and the story was not over. The first years were the hardest. She woke before sunrise. She cleaned floors, carried water, cooked, and obeyed without question. She was a servant, living in someone else's world. Yet, every day she watched. Every day she listened. Every day she learned. The household she served was not ordinary. It was a trading household. Ships arrived from the coast. Caravans traveled the roads. Merchants counted coins, weighed fabrics, and negotiated deals. Kemi remembered everything. The names, the routes, the rules. She asked nothing. She spoke little. She was invisible. But inside, she stored every detail like a treasure. The mistress of the house, Mama Efe, noticed her. One afternoon, she leaned over Kemi's shoulder as she counted coins. "You understand these accounts better than my clerks do," she said. Kemi looked up, calm but proud. She said, "I was educated as a princess, but I have nowhere to apply it except here." Mama Ife studied her eyes. She saw intelligence, fire, and a mind that could do more than wash floors. She decided to trust the girl. The first trade was small, a shipment of spices and cloth along a nearby route. Kemi calculated costs, measured risks, and planned carefully. 60 days later, the first profit arrived. Mama Ife clapped her hands in delight. Then came a larger trade, then a third. Each time, Kemi learned more, grew stronger, and grew smarter. By the third year, she was no longer just a servant. She was trusted, she was noticed, but she did not reveal her past. She gave her name only as Madam K, a woman of unknown origin with extraordinary skill. People asked where she came from. She only smiled. "My origin is not for sale. My goods are." Years passed. By year 7, her business had grown far beyond the household. Madam K now ran a trading empire across 3 territories. She commanded ships, caravans, and warehouses. She had allies, friends, and debts owed to her in every port. And quietly, she built connections near her brother's kingdom. She never forgot. She never stopped planning. Then, news came that would change everything. Oba Damilola's kingdom held its annual merchant feast. Every year, the king invited the wealthiest merchants across the neighboring kingdoms. The feast honored trade and reminded everyone of who held influence. By law, any merchant controlling a certain volume of trade had to attend. Madam K qualified. She had made sure of that 2 years in advance. She did not rush. She was not ready at year 5. She was not ready at year 6. By year 9, she had learned patience. By year 9, she did not need revenge. She needed only the truth to be seen, and she was finally powerful enough to make the room notice. The day of the feast arrived. Madam K came last. She wore a deep gold gown embroidered with patterns that shone under the palace lights. Her jewels sparkled. 3 carts of goods followed her: spices, fabrics, silks, a proper merchant's gift. She was exactly what they expected a merchant to be, and nothing they expected her to look like. The room was filled with music, chatter, and light. Counselors, ministers, and lords moved about, bowing to one another. But when she entered, every eye turned. She moved gracefully, quietly, like a storm contained in gold silk. Then she reached him. Oba Damilola, young king, tall and strong, glossy brown skin, wearing royal blue agbada, richly embroidered with gold, traditional crown in place, staff in hand. By protocol, he rose. He bowed. He spoke the words of welcome. And then their eyes met. The room continued. Music played. Voices rose. But between the two, time stopped. The king froze. His hand gripped the arm of the throne. He could not speak. Kemi looked at him calmly. "Oba, you have grown older," she said. She passed and took her seat at the table of honor. Her calm presence filled the room. Baba Rotimi, her uncle, was seated near the king. The moment his eyes fell on her, his face paled. He leaned over to a servant and whispered, "Find out everything about this Madam K tonight." Before the evening meal began, news came. His man had returned. The merchant's origin was unknown, but some of her contacts, 3 people who handled her transportation 10 years ago, were now part of her network. Baba Rotimi's blood ran cold. He knew. Meanwhile, the king sent a private note to Kemi's seat. "I did not know. I swear on my father's grave, I did not know." Kemi read it carefully. She folded it once, placed it in her pouch, then she wrote one line back. A servant carried it to the king. He read, "I know, I have always known. That is why I built an empire and came to this table instead of an army. Look at your uncle's face. Now you know too." The king's eyes widened. Baba Rotimi was already rising, calculating, but Oba Damilola's voice rang clear. "Uncle, sit down." The council fell silent. The king said, "My sister did not die of fever. She was taken from this kingdom by someone here. The woman at the table of honor has a scar on her left wrist, the same scar she received when she fell from a mango tree at age 11. Look at it." Baba Rotimi stood, his face a mixture of rage and fear. Then Kemi stood. She held the documents she had been collecting for 9 years, signed testimonies, purchase records, letters in her uncle's handwriting. 9 years of carefully collected documents. Testimony from the provincial lord who brokered the deal, signed in front of 2 witnesses. A purchase record with her description and the amount paid. A letter in her uncle's handwriting authorizing the transaction. The room was very, very quiet. Baba Rotimi looked first at the documents, then at the king, then at Kemi. His expression faltered. The man who had moved through kingdoms like a shadow, untouchable, now looked exposed, vulnerable. And then
he understood. Not just that he had been found out, not just that his betrayal would bring him shame and punishment, but that the woman he had underestimated for a decade had been preparing for this exact moment all along. He had faced many opponents in his life. He had crushed rivals, silenced enemies, and bent lords to his will. But in that instant, he realized something he had never faced before: the patient enemy. Kemi's eyes did not waver. Her voice, calm but strong, carried across the room. I have brought this document so that the kingdom may see the truth. Tonight, justice will be done, not by force, not by threat, but by evidence. You sold me, you betrayed your own family, and today your actions are revealed. The room was very, very quiet. Even the murmurs of the courtiers seemed to pause. All eyes were on Babarotimi, on the king, and on the woman who once was nothing and now was everything. Babarotimi sank slowly into his seat, his mind racing. He understood finally the terrible cost of underestimating someone who had spent nearly a decade learning, surviving, and building power. He knew in that moment the truth. The only thing worse than a powerful enemy is a patient one.
The truth had entered the room, and it was too heavy to ignore. Babarotimi stood still, but the power in his voice was gone. The king, Oba Damilola, slowly rose from his throne. This time, not as a boy, but as a king. "Guards," he said, firmly. The sound of his voice echoed through the hall. "Remove Babarotimi from this council." A gasp moved through the room. The guards hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. For the first time in many years, Babarotimi had no control. He looked at the king, then at Kemi, then back at the council. But no one spoke for him. No one moved to save him, because the truth had already judged him. He was stripped of his position, his power, his voice, and he was taken away to face judgment. The king turned back to the table, slowly, carefully. He picked up the documents again. "There are 3 others named here," he said. "They will be found and they will answer." The council nodded quietly. One by one, the lies were breaking. Even the provincial lord who had arranged the deal, though he had died 2 years before, his signed confession still stood. The truth had waited, and now it was speaking. Then the king turned to Kemi. The room held its breath. His voice softened. "My sister," he said, "I failed you." Silence. "I was told you were dead, and I believed it." His eyes lowered. "I would give anything to change that." Kemi watched him, calm, still, strong. The king continued, "I offer you everything that was taken from you. Your title, your lands, your place in this palace. You are Princess Kemi, and you will be restored." The room waited. All eyes turned to her. Kemi did not answer immediately. She stood there, quietly, thinking, remembering the cold nights, the hard floors, the tears she cried when no one was watching, the years she spent building something from nothing. Then she looked up and spoke. "I was a princess," she said slowly. Her voice was calm, clear, strong. "But now I am something this kingdom has never seen before." The room leaned in. A woman who built a trading empire from nothing, in a foreign land, with no name, with no protection, with no one to save her. She paused. "Give me my title back if you wish, but do not ask me to become small again." Silence. Deep silence. The king looked at her for a long time, and in that moment,
He saw her clearly, not just as his sister, but as a woman who had survived, who had grown, who had become more than what they once knew. Then he turned to the council. His voice was firm, stronger than it had ever been. From this day forward, he said, this kingdom will have something new. The room stirred. A position has been created, trade minister, with full authority in this council. Murmurs spread across the room. Confusion, surprise, shock. The king did not stop. I appoint my sister, Kemi. The room fell silent again. He looked at them one by one, and this time they saw a king. The last time I trusted this council over my own family, he said quietly. I lost my sister for 10 years. A pause. I will not make that mistake again. Later, when the noise had faded, when the court had emptied, Kemi walked alone through the palace gardens, the same gardens she played in as a child, the same paths her feet once knew so well. Everything felt familiar, and yet different. She stopped in front of a mango tree. The tree, the one she had fallen from when she was 11, the one that gave her the small scar on her wrist, the scar her brother had seen, the scar that brought the truth back to life. She reached up slowly and picked a mango, the first one within her reach. She held it in her hand, quietly. She did not cry. She had already cried. Every tear, every pain, every broken moment. She had cried it all in that first year. And after that, she made a choice. Tears would not build the life she needed. Strength would. Patience would. Time would. And she had been right. Now she stood in her garden, with her empire behind her, her future ahead of her, and a mango in her hand. She took a bite and closed her eyes. It tasted exactly the way she remembered. Moral of the story: they sold her because they feared what she could become. But fear is a foolish weapon, because what you fear does not stop growing just because you look away. They sold a princess. She came back a queen, and the only difference was time and patience. If this story touched you, if you believe patience is power, type "I will rise" in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful African stories that feel like movies. And remember, your story is not over yet.